We're here because of those which have put themselves before us. I couldn't have my family here. I couldn't be here. Therefore, I just can't take anything for granted.
Remembrance Day to me means peace and resolution, but also achievement, as it's the day that the Allied forces ultimately accomplished what so many sacrificed their lives for.
We pay tribute, we pay respect to all the ones that have survived, as well as the ones that regrettably died in action.
We can't forget those. We definitely cannot forget them.
In 2014, Rookwood Cemetery embarked on a project to acknowledge and remember those who have fallen in the First World War. During that process, our teams identified a number of unmarked graves in which those fallen soldiers had been buried. It's through this due diligence that our staff showed and care and attention to identify these unmarked graves and to work with the Rookwood Cemetery to make sure that those people who were buried here had a fitting tribute in future.
John Patrick Scullin. Even as a teenager, John Patrick Scullin was determined to fight for his king and country. He enlisted in the Australian Imperial Forces on the 10th of January 1916, stating that he was 21 years old. In reality, he was 2 years younger. On the 20th of September 1917, 6 days after his 21st birthday, whilst fighting in the Battle of Menin Road, John was killed in action, along with 4,629 other soldiers who died that day. John's family, devastated by the tragedy and unable to visit his grave in Belgium, had his name engraved on his brother's headstone in Rookwood Cemetery.
My role in the project was that when the guys identified the graves, I'd go out and we'd actually assist to cleaning the graves up and then actually placing the poppy as a mark of respect. It certainly opened my eyes because these are the graves which we've walked past so many times, not realising who they were. So it sort of just brought it home, really did.
I was one of many who volunteered some time to help with the cleaning and restoring of monuments of World War I soldiers. I also had the honour of being able to perform some graveside services on the anniversary of soldiers' deaths.
I was interested in World War I history, so when the project came along, I was keen enough to participate in it. So they assigned me to clean the graves, make them presentable, and we placed the poppies and did the service.
This is a perfect example of an unmarked grave at Rookwood, of a fallen soldier who's returned from war. As you can see, it's situated in an area where other soldiers have been recognised, and for some reason this one has not been. In order for us to figure out who has and hasn't been recognised, we engaged the services of one of our stakeholders, the Friends of Rookwood, and without their help and research, this project would not have been achievable.
As a volunteer tour guide, myself and one of my colleagues, we were asked to research some of the sites throughout here that are the family graves that could be incorporated in a special tour that will commemorate these men and women that were service personnel in World War I. We will be looking at commemorating their lives, the battles that they were involved in, and the internal battles that they went through as well as the battles that they had when they returned as well. And we've conducted that every April for the past 4 years.
The fallen certainly need to be remembered, as well as the ones who had all those terrible experiences and have returned back home.
They fought for our freedom. They were very, very impassioned about that. And without them, we wouldn't have the freedoms that we have today, which you and I enjoy.
George Leslie Wallace. At the age of 18, George Leslie Wallace enlisted in the armed services on the 27th of January 1915. He served in Gallipoli, and on the 8th of August 1915, his battalion took part in a costly and only partially successful attack on Hill 971. Later that month, they were involved in another attack, this time on Hill 60, during which they suffered heavy casualties. George was one of those wounded. He was shot 3 times, with one bullet going through the rising sun on his slouch hat, but luckily missing his head. He returned to Australia and was discharged on the 19th of August 1916. He received the Victory Medal, the British War Medal, and the 1914-15 Star Medal.
In respect of these servicemen and women, and in collaboration with their families, their monuments have now been cleaned, and we will share those stories as we go. One of which is the Manius family who have returned to Rookwood after many years to find that their grandfather's grave has now been cleaned up and repaired. Our aim is to now identify those more dilapidated monuments which we will look to repair in the future and share those stories and conduct our services at those monuments.
So what would it be? 40, 50 years since it last?
50, even 50 something.
I didn't get to meet my grandfather, unfortunately. He died in 1936. As a younger child, we certainly came out to Rookwood on a regular basis to have a look at his grave. We used to make a day of it and certainly have fond memories, and I think had we met him, we would have really loved him. He sounds like he was an incredible man.
He was a bush jockey, an incredible horseman. His favourite horse as a jockey and as a bushman was Starlight. And Starlight he ended up having as his horse throughout all the campaigns.
Sadly, the way we lost him was a great tragedy for the whole family. He was at home, actually in the lounge room of the house in Bundock Street at Coogee, with my mother, who adored her father, and a boyfriend of her older sister Joan, and they were looking at some war souvenirs that he had brought back, including a percussion bomb, which they used to use as a doorstop, and Mum remembered playing with as a baby. And I can only assume my grandfather must have been holding it, so he was the nearest to it, and the percussion cap was put back in the bomb, and even though it had been detonated, there was enough residue inside it to cause it to re-explode. And very sadly, he was so mortally wounded that he died before the ambulance got there. The boy, who was 19 at the time, lost an eye, and our mother was covered head to toe in shrapnel and during a lifetime had several operations, particularly around her abdomen, to remove the shrapnel. But it's ironic that that's how his life was ended. It would have been, as much or more of a tragedy had he been killed overseas in the war, but this way was almost worse because he was killed in his own home as a result of the war.
The Seabrook brothers, George Ross, Theo Leslie and William Keith, joined the Australian Imperial Forces in 1916. They fought in the Battle of Mannon Road on the Western Front. This battle was the first engagement of the AIF in this offence, and it proved a success. For the Seabrook brothers, however, this was their first and last battle. George was reported as killed in action on the 20th of September 1917. He was never found. Theo was reported as wounded in action on the 20th of September 1917. On the 27th, this was amended to killed in action. He too was never found. William was reported as wounded in action on the 20th of September 1917. He died on the 21st. Following this devastating ordeal, an AIF policy was put in place to ensure that brothers could no longer serve in the same battalion. Although the brothers were not repatriated to Australia, they are, however, remembered on their dear mother's grave.
With so many servicemen and women interred and memorialised at Rookwood, we are committed to recognise those that fought and gave the ultimate sacrifice for their country. However, as we provide services to the wider communities of Sydney, we also recognise those communities who also made the ultimate sacrifice, including the Russian community. We will remember them.
There were approximately 1,000 Russian Anzacs that were actively involved in Russians that happened to be here at the time, at the outbreak of World War I. They were the first, amongst the first to enlist with the Australian Imperial Army and were active on duty abroad, Gallipoli, Western Front. Some of them regrettably died in action.
This project has been a collaboration between Rookwood staff, community members, volunteers and families. We have tried to recognise the ultimate sacrifice that these people have gave to us in order for us to be safe. We hope through this project that we have recognised that ultimate sacrifice. Rookwood will remember them.
It's amazing that so many humble graves can hold so many fantastic stories. And of course the commemorations on the family graves. When I was researching, there was a box of tissues next to me all the time. We have to remember the sacrifices that they did for us and for us to actually have the life that we have today, and we thank them very, very much.